And you see my little cursor thing, and then I've got these little key doodads turned on, so it's gonna kind of show you what I'm typing. If I'm hitting shortcuts or something, I'm gonna try not to do that too much. All right. So, okay. For starters, this is the data panel. This is where all of your projects are going to be organized. If you have the free version, it might look slightly different, but this is where like I like to start a job in here, new project, um, name this, um, right click, we'll let you rename it. Then make sure you're in this project because it'll usually start you with a fresh design, like just a blank design space here. Then I like to get in the habit of having a folder for drawings and a folder for designs. This kind of helps keeps things organized. Designs or builds, doesn't really matter what you call them. Okay, once you're in here, you should have a fresh design here that you're looking at anyway that's blank. It should look like this. Your toolbar is going to look a little different, and you can modify that. I'll kind of show you how, but I'll make sure you can access all this stuff the same way that I can. I'm just going to save this in the right destination. Apple S standard. Make sure you're like, sometimes it'll default to a different file that you have going on or a different project. Make sure you're in the right folder that you want to be in. Um, yeah. All right. So this is named what we want here. It automatically versions things for you, which is nice. You can go through history if you want to. Um, I don't. I just auto save, and it prompts you with like a user generated autosave. You'll see that, and I don't really mess with it. All right, moving on here. Um, this little area is your browser. You have some document settings. This is where I like to change units if you need to. Uh, this yeah, you can go inch, feet, metric, whatever you like. I like to work in inches. I'll show you why we want to change that later. If you're looking to like have something tell you square footage, it's handy to swap that when you need to. Your origin, just like your model space there and your planes and whatnot. Um, okay. Other things here. You have this. Fusion does this weird marking menu when you right click, which I'm not a big fan of. Some people like it. You can get faster with it. So if you see this pop up when you right click, that's why. That's what it is. Just escape gets rid of that. Um, Also, your settings here are in preferences. Like you'll see your username over here, preferences. Um, I'll just kind of walk you through. Like in general here, this is the way I have things set up with a Z up. That makes the most sense. It's somewhat arbitrary, but if you get into cam stuff, you're probably going to want it set up that way. I like the SolidWorks set of navigation tools because that's middle mouse click orbit, scroll is zoom. I like the constrained orbit as well because then it just makes more sense to me. So I would start there and then play around unless you like know that you have a preference you like, but you can go with that. Um, Constrained orbit. I have zoom direction reversed, not a very big deal. Personal preference, camera pivot. I'm not even sure what that is, but not really sure what this one is. Um, your units in design, you can change it here or in that thing I showed you there. I think that's kind of all we really need to mess with for now. You do want to make sure capture design history is on. I'll show you why that's important later. Manufacturer, I don't really think I mess with. Electronics, I haven't really played with yet. That's all we'll mess with for now. Uh, all right. Another way to shortcut things is the S key brings up this design shortcuts menu where you can search for a tool that you want. Like let's see. Uh, Combine. I want a combine tool, or say I want to fillet something. You can find that tool here. But yeah, if you're seeing this thing show up, if it's because you hit S. Escape will get you out of it. Um, the view cube on the right here, if you get lost, like orbiting around, you can just tap one of these faces to get you to like a orthographic view. Home is like this 3/4 view here. Middle mouse click is orbit. Option and no, command, sorry, and middle click is pan. Command and click. Um, yeah, let's see. You've got some other tools here, or like orbit, look at, where if you have a face in here, you can click look at and then a face, and it'll take you to it. Your pan tool, zoom. You shouldn't really have to mess with these. Fit is nice if you get zoomed into your model weird, or you get like disoriented navigating around. That'll just fit the whole model to the workspace. Uh, your display settings. I'll just go through these so you can reference this in the video later if you want to try to match what I have. Um, yeah. What's up? Yeah. Somebody's got a little noise coming through. Better, right? Okay. Environment's not super important right now. That'll be a rendering thing, but that's fine. Effects, I like this setup this way. I would just try to match yours to mine for now, unless you have preferences you're aware of that you like better. Um, yeah. Camera options here. Ground plane offset, I'm not even sure what that is. These are my grid settings here. You can, I would, yeah, just match these for now. Viewports, I only work with one viewport in this. It seems to get me by just fine. If you have another, if you have a preference, you can play with that. All right, let's see here. Now, this is the timeline. We'll kind of get into that once I kind of jumped around here, sorry. Um, yeah, okay, so then we'll go into parameters. This is where I like to start. You don't have to start here, but it is nice. So in the modify drop down there, change parameters, gives you this dialog box, plus adds a user parameter. Let's go length, 12 inches, sure. Width 16 inches. And these, make sure your units are default to what the workspace is. You can change these. You can change these. I don't think you can change these after the fact, actually. So you kind of want these set to what you're using in the space. Let's go 18. And then I like to do like a, we'll go shorten it. Material thickness 0.75 for now. This can kind of be a placeholder. So now we've got these parameters defined. They're going to make a little more sense in a second. Okay. All right, and then this is where things will be tidier if you run this way. I'm going to close this data panel just because we don't need it anymore. You can reopen that by clicking this little grid of boxes here. So let's do, I like to start with a new component in this space. We'll go box. Let's say we're making a box here. And this is your active component. This will make more sense when we have more components in the space. Now you basically have similar setup to what this window gives you. This whole design operates as a component. So now we've got a component within this design. You want to start with a sketch. This is the way I like to do it. You can start with solids. I think sketches are a better way to start. They give you more control in the long run. I just selected, let me do that again here, undo. So I'm clicking create a sketch. I guess I should see, is everybody good here? Like, am I moving too fast, or is everybody following along all right? Good, cool. Okay. Okay. All right. Cool. Um, all right. So we're gonna create a sketch. Now this, you're highlighting the plane you want this sketch to exist on. You can start from the, you know, front. This is like your XZ plane, I guess. I'm gonna go with just the ground plane here. And you can confirm, making sure you're looking at the top of the cube up here. Your sketch palette opens up, which I don't really mess with this very much. We might down the road here. But let's see, for this, we're going to start with the box. So create a rectangle. I like a center point rectangle. You can play with these as you get, as you start getting more comfortable or whatever. Rectangle, you can also see here, like all of these tools, this tells me that the keyboard shortcut is R for this if I want to use that. I think I may have defined that, so yours might be different. If you want to set it up, these three dots at the right side of every tool give you, like, you can pin this to the toolbar, which is this space up here, um, pin it to shortcuts, which I think is the that right click menu, or you can define a keyboard shortcut for it here. We're just going to select that. I kind of start real arbitrary with this and just, that was one click, no drag, and just second click to end that drawing the rectangle there. Um, if you snap to the center, that's fine. But I didn't intentionally to show you guys that how the constraints work in this. And these little, so the constraints are. Let me see if I'm moving with. Yeah. Okay. Yeah. These little gray things here are constraints. So they match these symbols in this part of the toolbar. You've got like parallel. So all these lines are parallel. This one is horizontal, and you can kind of match them to these here. And if you have a line drawn that's close to the x-axis or closer to the y-axis, it automatically snaps to whichever one it aligns to, whichever one it's a little closer to. This is perpendicular. It's telling us that these two lines are perpendicular with one another. And you can kind of see, because this is all blue, none of this is defined or constrained. So we can kind of drag this thing around. It's like all mobile in space right now. Nothing's really telling it where these lines need to exist. So sorry, I was kind of skipping ahead here. This is dimension, or you can go in the create window, dimension, shortcut D. Uh, you can pick a line, you can pick two lines, and then I'm telling it how far apart these are. And so now you can type a number into this space, or you can reference a parameter. So because we set up those parameters earlier, I can just start typing width, and it knows that I want to fill this with that text box, or that parameter we defined. Uh, enter, enter. So now this line is 16 inches long. And it tells us that fx tells you that you're referencing a user-defined parameter. Now let's go, what did I call it? Depth. Let's see, what did I? Length. Okay. Here. So now this box is defined by those two parameters. You can drag it around. You can see it's going to keep its shape. And if you want to, so I hit D there, shortcut D, and I'm just telling it the dimension from the origin of the center point of this plane here. I'm just making this up. Let's go 2.5 inches. So now these two lines are constrained, and these we can drag it up, and we can. Oops, I'm still in dimension here. Escape. Let's go the tool that you're working with. You can drag this box around, but you can tell that it's constrained by where it is in relation left and right to that point. So if I'm ever having a hard time figuring out why something's not fully constrained, I'll just kind of drag around and see what happens, maybe undo it. So now if I hit, this is going to be 1 inch above that point. This box is now fully constrained. We know we have all the points that it needs for it to exist. If I were to get rid of this horizontal constraint, now it can it knows the length and the width, but it doesn't have any orientation as to how those lines relate to the rest of the space. So then if I wanted to, these dotted lines are construction lines. So let's say I wanted to, nah, we'll skip that for now, sorry. So I'm going to get rid of these and make this aligned with the axes there. Create a coincident between this center point and this center point, and now this is locked to the center of our sketch plane here. And that dimensions. Yeah, okay. Does anybody have any questions about sketches here? Okay. So it's basically because this box, we know how wide it is and how long it is, but it doesn't have any. This point is absolute. This is 0. So if once I tell this the sketch where this point is in relationship to this point, and you kind of have to be aware of how you're dragging so you're not defining like a hypotenuse or something there. So now I'm telling the sketch that this is 4.5 inches from this point. And then if I want to, it can be, 1.5 inches down from that point. It's kind of, I usually just start in the center to make things easier. And this is kind of not entirely necessary. It keeps things clean as it gets more complicated when everything's fully constrained. It's totally fine to move forward with an unconstrained sketch. You can work with this, doesn't matter. But it's going to make your life easier down the road if everything is all fully like locked off. Yeah, like once, yeah, exactly. So once all these lines are black, you know that it has all the information that it needs to put all these coordinates in space, based on math and not like it's not just floating anywhere. So because further down the road, if you make a change to one of these and it's not referenced by the center point or it has no real definition as to where it lands in space, it'll just kind of arbitrarily expand, and that might cause problems down the line. Um, it it doesn't really. You'll be able to move things freely. You'll be able to move the objects or bodies once you create a volume. So this is just for it's just for ease of like modifying things down the road. So, all right, cool. Moving on. So then you have to hit finish sketch here. That just let's see if there's any other tools in here. I'm just gonna go through like the bare bones for now until you guys get comfortable and can like sort of not be too overwhelmed. You can play with all these things. There's like mirroring and circles and like some pretty standard shapes in here. There's like a polygon. You can define how many sides you want on the polygon, things like that. Uh, Curves. Yeah, we're just gonna kind of keep things basic for now. So I'll go to finish the sketch, and now that grid goes away. That's kind of why I have these things set up the way I do, so that I know when I'm in a sketch and when I'm not, because that can get a little complicated. So now this sketch is created inside this active component. So that's why I created a component and then a sketch. You can see this. You can label this. Let's say I try to label stuff as much as I can as I'm moving along, just to because once you have a bunch of sketches and a bunch of shapes, it's really nice to be able to find stuff in here. Yeah, yeah, kind of, yeah. This is like an outliner in SketchUp. I don't really know what it would be in Rhino, but yeah, this is like your hierarchy of components, where what shows you what components are inside other components. All right, so we've got our box shape here. Okay. All right. Well, um, I like it. You can also collapse this if it bugs you, if you don't like working with it. I'm over here kind of a lot. I like having this thing open and be able to see where my stuff is. Uh, let's see. Okay, so now we're going to like create a volume from this, which is the in create, and you kind of work your way from left to right as you're creating shapes here is like a good rule of thumb. It's like sketch, and then you can use a sketch to revolve that or create uh, like loft or some other different things. There's a lot of cool stuff. You can create threads in here, and it makes hardware really easy. Some Yeah, you can create volumes from it, but I think the control of a sketch is a little bit better. Okay, so I'm going to extrude. So create. I think the default shortcut is E for extrude. Uh, so it automatically selects this because we only have one sketch. It You need to tell it what profile you want to extrude. Like if I didn't want that one, I could click that X, and now I need to tell it which profile we want to send into space. So we have this. You can drag this, and you can all these boxes you can just type a value into if you want to. I like parameters because it makes things like really nice down the line. So let's define this by our height now. Um, and these, yeah, I don't really mess like a bunch of different shapes or something. Um, Yeah, you do a bunch of sketches, or I would you'd have to get more complicated with your labels. Like if you have it'd be like pedestal one height or pedestal two height, or you would do a one design for each like pedestal you have, and then you can create another design and insert those into one overall design that links all those other components that you have. Does that make sense? Yeah, totally. Yeah, exactly. Exactly. You don't have to be referencing parameters. I'm just kind of showing you that so that you have like, and then if you hit a parameter and then you want to change it, let me show you what I did here. The other thing I really like about this software is that you have a timeline of features, they're called. So everything's like visually represented by the little icons that the tools use. So here's where we created the sketch. If I right click, I can go back and edit this sketch, or if I don't like this feature. So the other thing that happened here, yeah, so let's edit this feature in the timeline. It automatically takes me back to that operation that we performed here. And it shows me how high we extruded. The other thing that it does that you have to pay attention to is there's like different modes, different methods of operation that it does where if you have more geometry in the space, sometimes this will join to something you already have existing. You can use this to cut volumes from other shapes. You can use it to intersect where only the overlapping parts remain, or you can create a new body. But so I'm going to show you where this gets the funky thing that this does is you can only create a new component the first time you extrude this. So I'm just going to undo until we didn't extrude and go back, hit E, extrude this, and now I have a new option here for new component. So I'm going to select that, draw this up to our height, Oh, what happened here? Whoops. Escape. Something got funky, so I hit escape. I don't know. I don't know what I did. Let's make sure we have a new component selected here. We're in this dialog box. Okay. Now you can see I created a new component inside the box. Um, it's kind of personal preference. I'm just going to call this volume. And so now you can see, well, you kind of need more components in here for it to make sense. But now this sketch is inside this component, not this one. But every component that has a shape, this is a body. And then you can have multiple bodies inside of a component, but there's only one volume per body, if that makes sense. Um, yeah. Okay. Component inside a component. hmm And so if I want to, I can also use this. And so it automatically makes that sketch disappear. The little eye on the left will make things visible or invisible. Um, so let's make that visible again. I can hide this body, or I can do the same thing by hiding this component. It's kind of just, it makes more sense when you have a lot of geometry for a more complex shape. But so now I'm going to use this same sketch again and draw it up a different amount. Like let's go 24 inches up and create a new body. And so now inside this component, we have a body, and this component, come on now, also has a body that are overlapping. You can see they're in the same space. Um, we'll just hide this one for now. Okay, well this will let me show you. This will let me show you like the um, active components. So because we have two here, if I make, let me just clean this up a little bit. Okay. Because this volume is inside this component, we can see them both. But if I activate this component, it grays out everything else around it. So it makes it a little easier when you have a lot of complex shapes to keep things organized, or like assemblies of parts. You'll put components inside components to allow you to isolate them. And it comes in handy because it also isolates their timeline. So I'm only seeing the operation that was performed to this body. It'll make more sense down the line, but if I activate the entire design, we have a lot more operations. So when you get into something that's really complicated, you've got a string of things that happen down here that makes it hard to figure out which feature applies to what shape that you have in there. Exactly. And like you're just like focusing your yeah, you're narrowing down the scope of like what you're focusing on to that specific area. And so that's why, yeah, and you can weed out all the unnecessary ones because like if we go into like something that's a little more complicated, oh, that's a drawing, sorry. Get this out of here. No. Oh boy. Like see how I've got a lot more stuff going on here, and this one's not bad at all. Sometimes this is a whole, you got to scroll through this whole thing to find the stuff you want. Um, all right, so then I'll show you, like if you want to edit this feature, you can kind of hover over it and it'll show you which shape, or if you click, it highlights what shape you're working with. So you can narrow things down that way, but it's just a lot easier when it's messy to just go into like this component, and then I can see if there's like fillets and holes and all sorts of other stuff happening to that. You don't want all this other noise in your way. So I'm going to hide this body because we don't really need it. Then I'm going to make sure I have this volume selected. Actually, you know what? No, I want to do this. Yeah, this one. Yeah, okay, I'm gonna do it this way. Sorry. Uh, so now I want to modify this shape. Let's say it's like a slightly more complicated. Uh, how you get more complicated geometry is where your sketches land. So you need a plane to create a sketch. Your your model, your design automatically has these three planes, but you can use this construct option to allow you to create planes in different ways. So like let's say you want to create a weird profile on this edge, or you've got like a complicated shape. You can do like a plane at an angle, and then you select a line, and you can kind of define. Let's say you've got it like a feature at a 45-degree angle to this thing. Now I can sketch on this plane that's not like in a ortholinear orientation to the overall design. I'm gonna undo that. All right, so let's just keep it a little. So I just selected a feature. These are all planes that we've created now because we have this volume and space here. Just pick the side. We're on the right side. Now I'm gonna hit. Well, let's see if you. I guess P is the only way to get this. I hit shortcut P, and you're projecting geometry. So then I can highlight existing geometry. And if things are at angles, this is kind of nice to find lines for things. I'm just going to highlight this whole side. And so the projection link is selected. That means now all of this geometry is a part of this sketch. And I can't move this around because the purple lines mean that it's referenced by something that's created somewhere else. This can't be modified here. But if I modify the shape before we create this sketch, it'll modify that projection, if that makes sense. Okay, so now I'm going to create a line, or L. I'm going to snap that little triangle is your midpoint. I'm going to click there, drag this down. You can see that little square that pops up is keeping me perpendicular to that line or at a right angle. If you drag over here, that's why sometimes, like if you're trying to draw something if it's trying to snap, you can just throw this out into space anywhere. You can hit this green arrow to finish the operation, or just click and then hit escape will do it as well. So now this thing's just sort of floating in space. You can also use construction lines as like guides. So if you hit, let's see, I guess the only way to do it is X on the keyboard. Oh, these got moved. So X is going to, like now when I create a line, see how it's dashed? That's just showing me if I create a shape here, it's not a closed profile. Or I can highlight this and hit X, and then it turns it into a construction line. So now this snapped to vertical. I'm just going to hit X here, dimension this. Let's just make this 2.5 inches. And this is all fully constrained now because it's black. Escape here, sorry. X again to toggle the construction lines. I'm going to drag this over here, snapping the perpendicular to there and there. So now this is all fully constrained. And see how if I hover over this, it highlights these pieces of geometry. That tells me that they're closed shapes. Like, so you can't extrude an open form. So if one of these were a construction line, it's not closed. So this whole shape is closed, but I don't have this little corner that I want anymore. Or if this line fell short, oops. If this lands short here, and sometimes this will be like microscopic, which is can be annoying. It's rare. They snap pretty nicely. Now I still don't have a closed shape. Um, a way you can kind of cheat this is extending tools, or yeah, you can extend lines. So if I hover over this line, it automatically extends to the next piece of geometry that it's sitting next to. So now I hit escape to let go of that tool. We've got two closed pieces of geometry. Okay. All right. Does that make sense for now? All right. Okay, cool. So I'm going to finish that sketch now and go to extrude again. And I'm going to use this piece of geometry I created to modify this existing shape. I'm going to highlight this. If I do this, it automatically is joining to this geometry. If I take it away from that space, it automatically turns it into a cutting operation. And then you have a dialog box of which bodies you want to cut. So let's say you have a bunch of geometry in here and you really only want to take this away from this shape and not like stuff that it's next to. You can turn this off and then it won't affect certain pieces of geometry. For now, we want to cut this one. Or you could still make this a new component, but I'm going to cut this shape from that one. And now inside this component, there are two operations here. Okay. And like this is how I might go about drawing this. There's a million ways as any software to do the same thing. This is just kind of the way that I've found works for me for things like this. So now now I want to turn these into, let's say we're trying to build this box. Like I want to give this to a guy on the floor or CNC a face from it. I want to turn these into actual pieces of material. So you could do it a number of ways. You could create a sketch that's defined by, your material thickness, but I have kind of enjoyed, so I don't want that. I like doing, let's do this. And I don't want to extrude this way. I want it to exist inside the shape. So I'm going to say negative material thickness. And I don't want this to cut away from that. I want let's do a new body. Wait, sorry. Okay, I'm going to back up because I want these to be created inside here and not inside that volume. Okay, so I'm going to do it again. Extrude. I don't want that one. Let's do that face. Negative material thickness. And I want to create a new component. Totally. hmm Or I'll call it like quarter MDF, quarter ply, quarter, or yeah, you can have as many of these as you want. They're case sensitive, so you can change them up however you'd like. Yeah, making like the first couple letters unique is valuable because then it's just easier to get to. Like instead of having a bunch of quarter to type to get to something, if it starts with like MDF or ply or acrylic or whatever you may have. Uh, exactly. So you can with a plugin that is we can talk about that. There is a let's see. Yeah, so I have this plugin import export parameters, so we can have a spreadsheet of like so this was something I exported from a design that was all sorts of nonsense, but you could have like a material thickness default spreadsheet that you plop in here when you start a design. Yeah, it's super handy. Or you could export that and it might have info on it that's handy as well. But yeah, good question. Um, okay, so now this created a component inside this box. See? So now let's just label this. Is that? Wait, that's the back. We'll go back face. You can have spaces in here. Uh, extrude again. I don't want that. Oh shit. So I didn't select. Oh fuck, that's not gonna work. Sorry. Why? So if I hide that, it probably won't default to that. Select this face. Actually, okay. So let's say I didn't actually want. Okay, this is fine. Okay, so I want, let's say this is going to be like a step thing, but I want the treads to sit on top of those faces, right? For now, that's going to just boil down to the order that we modify things. Oh, see, I did use that right click. So if you've just done an operation or like, uh, you know, executed a feature, whatever you want to call it, if you right click and go up, you can repeat extrude. So you can get, I guess I didn't even realize I was using those. You can get a little faster at doing things, and you can change these defaults to where you just make like a quick gesture with the mouse, and then it takes you into the operation you want to do. Okay. I wish it would default to new component. Um, okay. All right. That'll be fine. We can mess with that later. So now, okay, I want to create this side, but I don't like this side's not going to be right, right? So the way because this side is going to have we want to have all these parts like butting over the top of that. Let's This combine tool is how you would like allow two pieces of geometry to interact with one another. So you select your target body first and then the tool body. So your tool body is just any volume that you have created here. So this our overall, and if you've got, oh no, we don't like that one. But let's go modify. You can select it from over here or by hovering. And then the tool body we want to use is, oh, hell, I should have been labeling these. See, I didn't even. You don't have to label all this stuff, but it makes your life a lot easier. Or if you're just trying to rough something out, like maybe this shape would have been all you needed. Um, yeah, it depends. Yeah, it is now. Yeah, I'm kind of always like exploring new ways. It's just sort of like whatever s- seems to make more sense to me, and I'm sort of trying to draw in ways that make changing the parameters down the line work better, if that makes sense. Because there's like I've seen how they jam things up, and so doing this kind of eases things for the software down the line if you want to change a parameter. So I'm going to cut this shape. I'm using this face to cut this face. Okay. And so if I don't have this keep tool selected, it's going to get rid of this shape for me. But let's just do it for now. And it disappeared, and I didn't like that. I can double click or right click, edit feature, and go back and keep tools here. So now I still have that face. And then I want to do the same thing. So I can either right click and drag. Oh, no, I can't because I went to the timeline. Let's go use this. to cut this. I want to keep tools. Now it should keep tools for me. Repeat, combine. Select the order that you select them is important, and you can go back and change this later. Like say that's not the right one, you messed up. It's not that body you want. Maybe I want to cut this from that. You can always go back and change them, but that's not what I want to do. I want to go here. So now I know what I'm cutting from what. So now I want this tread to sit on top of that. So I'm gonna select this one, cut it from that. And let's see, you can also do multiple, you can cut a couple things at once. So say that's hard for me to select. I know that I have this labeled. See, it has to be the body itself. That body, I want, let's say I want, no, I guess you can only cut one. Sorry, my bad. You can use multiples to cut. Like repeat here, if I go here, I want that one to cut and that one to cut and that one to cut. I could have selected all of these at one time. I was just kind of brain farted or wanted to show you guys how to do that operation. Make sure you're keeping all the tools. And then if I want to, let's see, I need to. Oh, so this one was wrong. Let's see. So I don't like the way these are stacking up here. If I, oh damn, what did okay. Yeah. So I want this one to be cut by that one. God damn it. Yes. Yes. Which is that's the one of the biggest things I like about this. Okay, let's see. I didn't do this right, right? Um, and I don't like how these stack up. I want these to sit underneath each other. So I'm just going to extrude from here. And I could just click to this face and it would automatically move there. Or I could do this because I know that's my material thickness. Let's do that. So that's going to create a new body that I'm going to have to join. And then, oh, but I don't want to keep tools when I join. Now, this, I would just hide this. Now, if you're in this, it should automatically join to the part that you have here. So it defaulted to just extending that geometry. And now see how everything else is grayed out. I'm only looking at this part, and I can see a lot easier what sort of things were done to it. You know, who cut it and where. Let's go back into, and I want this to be cut by that. Okay, now I want this to be cut by that. Okay, this is looking more like what I want here. And then I'm going to turn this volume on and cut all of these shapes from it. This is one way, I'm sure there's a million ways to do this same thing. This is just one way I like. Keep all the tools, cut this. So now we can see if I isolate this volume, this is only this shape. If I go to extrude again, negative material thickness. It's kind of making this look clunkier than it is. Okay, now we can yes. Yeah, so that's what I'm going to show you now here. We can get rid of this overall volume and see, like, because this side is going to be identical to that one. We already, because we know our sketch is centered on that origin. So when you mirror here, there's a mirror tool over here in Create, or if yours doesn't look like that, Create, Mirror. You have to make sure that you're uh, selecting what you want. Like if you mirror the body or the component, I don't really mess with modifying faces. I'm not sure. I mean, maybe that's for people that are doing like more solid model-y type stuff. So I've selected the component inside this one. So now when I pick this side, see how it's highlighting the component itself and not the body within it. Because if I go to body and select this, it's not going to mirror this whole. It will mirror that geometry, but it's going to create a body inside this component here, which is not what I want. Okay, so select what you want to mirror, the plane that you want to mirror it across. So, like, if I select this face, it's going to flop over there. But if it was the wrong one, I can select this center point. Yeah, and that's what I want because I know that our model is centered over this. And now we have our side here, side mirrored. It tells you. Yeah, if you wanted to, if this was not centered, like let's say we went, let's say I go back in time here before I did that. Well, that's probably going to complicate things here. But like that's where you'd use these construction planes. If you have something like if you have something weird that you want to do, you can create a mid plane, like you want to mirror something. Now we have this shape that's showing me so that creates construction planes. And that's inside your component here. Why did that do that? I picked the wrong ones. Okay, so let's modify this then. Edit feature. Because I picked the front and the back, which isn't what I wanted. Let's do it again. This one. And this side here. So now we have a mid plane there that we can slice it with. You can use your modify tool if I wanted to. You can split a body here, or I could split a bunch of these bodies with a plane like this. And now you have a seam down the middle. Yeah, there's a lot of ways to skin that cat. Let's say I don't like these, you can delete these features. Done, they're never there. So then, yeah, let's see how well this works if I want to go and change, like, let's say our material thickness isn't actually 3/4, and it's like we want to do it at a half now. All of these sides now are 1/2 inch. So another, uh, yeah, because of the way I drew it, that's why I like to like create a volume and then sort of reduce the shapes, the material thickness from it, um, because of that feature there. And you can also Um, like here, let's say, uh-huh. Yes, yeah, because you're drawing from that face outward. Yeah, basically. So this plane is fixed. So because I drew in from it, it is that's not going to move in space. But if you drew out from it, that plane would still exist there because it is essentially defined by our sketch. So if I also went in and said, let's say the width of this box is different and it's 24 inches now. Oh, hell. Oh, it can be, yeah, for sure. Like it really it I don't do parameters for like every single build. It works for some things well, or you try to keep these designs small. Okay, so I know why this happened. Okay, because when we did this volume, right? And I extruded and I cut this shape. Let's select this. So there's uh yeah, this cut, because this was 18.5 inches, it wasn't defined by a parameter, but if this was width, then it would cut the full width of your shape. So that's kind of why it's nice to have those things like uh, all reference each other. But yeah, it causes a little uh, fuckery, you know. Um, okay, so then like let's say if for me to get this stuff, and I'm just gonna hit like Apple S to save. I don't change the names of these. I haven't really seen any cause to, because of the way it versions things. It's nice. Like I can go in here and promote one of these if there's a change that I don't like, I can go back and I don't need to recall those. Um, so this is, let's say we want to CNC like these, right? Like if we were doing something like this, let's say it's a couple stairs, I'd probably let guys hand cut this stuff, and this is only the real thing that's like critical. Um, this is the order that I like to do things in, just to keep things simplified again. So if I go and I create a new component, I like to sketches. Now I'm creating sketches in here, and I'm just going to project this geometry, right? So I'm just kind of getting my bearings here. And if I select this side, it shows me the geometry that is making up this sketch. You see that? Does that make sense? Like if I highlight this, let's label it. I have this part here. Should I do it? I'm going to do it again for another part. So, and even because this tread goes underneath this riser, if I create a sketch here off of this face, it's including all that geometry that goes underneath other parts of things as well. Uh, so now let's like call this our finish that sketch. Even if we don't need that one now, um, and then if I want to send these to a CNC, I don't really want to send that one. Right click, save as DXF, and then ideally you have like a project folder. I'm not sure how you guys do stuff, but like if I have a project, let's say I don't have one yet. Dope, love it. Um, I'd probably Yeah. Yeah. And the reason I like to do that is because construction lines show up in the DXF. Like they may be dashed in here, but if you have lines helping you like define something in there, they'll show up in the DXF and the operator can get confused like what all this extra geometry is. But then I like this because if we like change the length, let's see if this works this time. Kind of, yeah, basically. But it's nice because I don't have to flatten them. Like I don't have to take these, rotate them around, and lay them flat anywhere. This is a 2D shape, and it's going to be the right orientation. And this is a 2D shape. It's the right orientation. There's no hint of like perspective messing you up. And like if I go, let's say we change that material thickness, you can also reference multiple things. This is kind of complicated down the line stuff maybe, but like let's say we want to have like an actual material, which is, oh, you know what? Sorry. Let's go like I want, like say it needs to be super accurate and you're like you have an offset and then you have an actual material which would be, okay, this would be like, let's say our half inch is 0.435. Okay, so now your material thickness, because we already have this in our model, I want this to be an equation. So it's going to be actual plus offset. So that's 445 now. And then this piece that's projected takes all of that into account. So let's say if you want to measure things as well, you're going to want to inspect, or I is measure. You can click like a line that's 24 inches. This line here, well, so I'm going to hit escape, I again. God damn it. I again. You could do 2 points. God damn you. Of course. Let's see. Okay, let's click this one here. We're trying to measure that. So that shows me it's 445. And then just to make it like a little more obvious, we're using actual material is going to be 0.231, but we still like that like 10 thousandths offset. This is all now quarter inch, 231 plus 10 thousandths of an inch. So 241 here. And then this sketch, because it's referencing this geometry that's projected, is all changed. Like if you're looking like glue and staples, if you're trying to be super precision, I probably wouldn't do that, but if you like really, if you, I'm just showing you that you can have one value made up of multiple values. So if you can have like a length that's half of a width, like let's say you want to move stuff around, that's, you can create functions in there basically. Um, yeah. So that's kind of the like what I thought we should go through for now, just because I think it's kind of a lot to chew. And then if you guys have questions or like I think if you play with it a little bit and sort of gather up some of your frustrations, and then we get together and kind of do a review, like you try to draw some actual stuff and run into the problems that you run into, we can go over what's weird. Or if you guys have questions now or want to see, like if you have an idea you want to see executed now, I'm happy to do it. Oh, okay. Let me just show you guys how to move things real quick, because it's gonna come in handy, and there's a handful of different ways to do it. So, are we over time? Am I like taking up way too much time? Okay, all right. So modify, uh, modify, move, and then I want to move this whole component. Let's see, if I try to select it from over here, each of these is a component, so it gets a little funky, but I know that this whole box is one component, so I want to move that thing. All right. There's a handful of different types of moves, like your free move, translate, which I don't use very much, rotate, which I use, point to point, I use a ton, and then point to position is handy. These arrows are like, along that axis, along this axis. It's kind of self-explanatory. The handles will let you rotate. Um, if you, let's say you wanted to like kick this over on its edge, but you don't like how it's rotating from the middle of it, you can redefine your pivot point by one of like a point anywhere on this side. It snaps to things, or like you might have to create a piece of geometry, like a point in your sketch that you want this to snap onto if it's really specific. So when you're moving your pivot point, I'll hit like the check mark here. Uh, Now it's locked in there, and I'm rotating it from that little point. And then the other weird thing about Fusion is that you have to capture it. Like let's say I don't, and I go okay, it'll prompt you, and then I want to create a new component, and then I want to create a new sketch here. It I don't know why it gives you this option to not capture it, but you typically want to capture it, capture your position. Otherwise, it's going to get rid of that move for me. I'm just going to undo that, undo that. Just going to undo. And then, or if you select the component you want to move and then hit move, it automatically knows that you want to fuck with that component. And let's say we want to line it up, like I like point to point a lot. It's pretty accurate, so you can like grab this point, that point, this point, or if you're trying to move faces around, I'll grab this. Let's say this is kind of in the way of my thing of where I want to go, so I'll hide this box. And you see this blue line that pops up? That's showing me where it's going to go. So I know that that corner is now lined up with like the origin of my thing, or that could be another body in here, or that could be a point on a sketch as well. So if you want to sketch like the locations of all these things, you can go point to point and then land this thing right where you want it. Let's say I wanted that to be the middle instead of the corner. I can go and highlight the middle of this thing. And now the middle of that line is lined up with the origin. Or let's do another one, because this is a one that you'll probably use a lot. Highlight that component, move it, and I want to create a copy. And so we're out here. It gets rid of that dialog box, but you have to tell it you want to create a copy and then drag it out. So that's kind of one of the easier ways to create multiples of something. You can also create a pattern. If you have, you can do like a rectangular pattern, a circular pattern, a pattern on path, which is super useful if you have like, I don't know, a funky shape that you want like a bunch of verticals aligned with, or ribs inside a contour. I use that like a motherfucker. Like you've got, 1x3s you want to cut out of a curved shape so somebody can nail wiggle to it. I'll draw a 1x3, extrude it up, and then create a pattern on a path that then cuts out all those shapes from a rib, and then we CNC that, and all our shit fits together. Okay, now does anybody have specific questions? Sure, sure. I mean, the UFO was weird because of that cone face. I didn't want them. I was able to like flatten that cone so we could CNC it and kind of lay it on there. Yeah, yeah. which was and because it had holes for acrylic bubbles that we kind of wanted to dial. So like those holes fit perfectly. They landed between ribs. Um, Stuff like that. Like I get what you're saying. Where like a lot of stuff like this something like this, we would not CNC any of it. You know what I mean? But like let's go to. I just kind of wanted to give you guys like a foundation for starting to draw, so then you can use these tools to like start messing with more of the things that you like. So like let's see. Anthony had us do this little coffee table. Um, oh yeah, you're cutting that, right? Okay. Oh, I almost don't want to dive into like animations and drawings and stuff yet, just because it's kind of a lot. Uh, so for this, like we cut these legs. Let's get rid of my output sketches here. And you can also like this tool will you can create your selection priority. Like say you want it to be a body or a component. Sometimes I like it changes how I work, but then you want to go like selection filters and select all if you get frustrated with it, or selection priority bodies or components. So now this is going to go a component. You can just drag shit too, if you want to. Um, and then this little revert tool is kind of nice because it drops things right back into where you want them to be. But yeah, so I use this to like, we cut these parts and then this thing, those little pockets in there, and that's what we would CNC. Um, yeah, because these are a part of that geometry there. And I think he is now. He wasn't for a while, and I would just send him a drawing and try to make those callouts in the drawing, or I would just like tell him if it's complicated. I would give him like the this thing where it's like it has like some specifics that he needs to do, like the depth of that pocket he can't see from a 2D file, so he needs to know how deep. I mean, he's kind of with it enough to where once he sees this drawing and that thing goes into that, he'll measure that tenon and cut the thing. He can't always like come to those conclusions on his own. So I try to call out what I can. It's nice. I would like everybody to be able to use it so he can just kind of tear apart the model and measure stuff for himself. Let me see. What was the Okay, this is kind of a good one for yeah, our oval credenza here. Not really, no. That we're trying to get him on it now. Um, exactly. Yeah. So this is like so this is kind of a good example of so I have this isn't as organized as it should be here. But this little link is showing you like this object I have in here is is linked from over here. I drew it in a separate file so that I can go back and isolate. But then if I change that, I just update this, and then all the changes that happen in the other document are in there. Does that make sense? Yes. Like, well, it'll okay. Let's say it'll give you an error warning. So like I have all these walls in here. Yeah, yeah, exactly. Let me just show you what it looks like. So like if I move this wall, yeah. Uh-huh. I've never had that happen. No. Mm-mm. Yeah, definitely. Yeah, if you change the location of it, for sure. That's kind of why I tried to show you guys the right way to do it, so that if you do it uh, correctly, like let's see. Well, okay, let me just show you the first one. What is it? Kyle's question. So if we're in here, see how the I changed the wall with holes, and now it's telling me it's giving me this little like attention thing that's like it tells me that there's a link in here that's out of date, so I can get all the latest. Yeah, and then it's gonna move. It's gonna modify that thing there. So yeah, like okay, to your point, like I don't. I think I sent the CNC this face for this job, and everything else, carpenters built. Uh, they frame the flats, like they get dimensions for stuff. This credenza, we kind of like to do our. I used to do ribs with holes in them, and you can see that I like removed this feature here, so these aren't happening. But let's go into this. Okay, yeah, like yeah. Um, I like him. Scott, our shop foreman, has kind of been like. I mean, it's up to whoever's. I don't know. I try to design in a way that Scott, because Scott has a better idea as to like the skill level of guys on the floor, what they can figure out on their own, what I need to make dummy proof, or like, and then maybe he's like, like. I want to use MDF, and he's like, we've got a bunch of extra wiggle, so the material thickness is X, Y, or Z, or it's like, so if I get rid of like the skin here, and see these ribs. Oh, what the fuck happened there? Like this top piece uh, is what. So I would have given him. Let's see what the fuck. Like I go to show you guys a job and it's all screwy. Ah, now what happened here? What have I done? This is a great example. Um, let's just. Why? One of these fucking removed it. God damn it, man. Well, okay, if I go, uh, this is kind of where the timeline gets can bone you, but now I don't know why that would have. Um, yeah, so I would have sent the CNC, this shape here, and then called out that we have a little lip here that defines where oh my god, the the wiggle lands, if that makes sense. But I probably went back before, like this is how our shop foreman guy likes to do these sort of things. Like we have a little relief that catches the wiggle, and then the ribs just line up with the end of the material, and that defines the shape of this thing. Yeah. Yeah. So, um, I think maybe that's like enough to get you guys like probably good and frustrated with it, and then we can meet up again and see what hiccups you guys have, or like what specific things you want to model that like what problems you run into that we need to solve. I'm down if you guys have time. Seems like all right. Okay. Cool. So I mean, like maybe I'm down if you want to go a week or like a week's probably a better amount of time for everybody to have like yeah, let's yeah, we got everybody's on this email thread. Let's do that. Yeah, for sure. Yeah, and if anybody wants to reach out individually, like you're super frustrated with a particular thing, let me know. There's a ton of tutorials on like, on YouTube and whatnot, whatever. Cool. Yeah, no problem. All right, I'll see you guys later.